A certain king told his son, contrary to the popular metaphysical belief, man's suffering does not come from his desires and the frustration of being unable to satisfy them. Nope. The suffering is from not knowing how to satisfy that thing which gives rise to the desires. While the standard castes go off each morning to raise the crops, man the markets, open the banks, wage the wars, run the government, and petition the gods, the more awakened do what they must, then move on to affairs of greater personal profit. The philosophy of the rich is, I want to get richer. The philosophy of those in power is, I want to stay in power. And the philosophy of man is, I don't want to have to do anything to change. In various ways, man's religions assure him that he is free and responsible for his actions. Thus is he relieved of his initial understanding of the matter, which was in conflict with the later view. Humans are the only animals who can kiss one another into submission. Reacting to some unexpected neural activity some humans were attempting, local conditions asked Life, "Want me to go down and put them back to sleep good?" And Life replied, "Save yourself the effort. Just go and ask them for a personal anecdote." If religion is a way of living, this kind of stuff is a way of thinking, of intellectually confronting life. The music men like most is the sound of talk. The court philosopher said to the prince, there could be pictured only one useful dichotomy of man, and that would be him divided into those who construct and those who destroy. With most living such bland mid-road lives as to not be readily identifiable as either. No. The simple want to believe in a physical Superman, and the city intellectuals in super knowledge, while the more awakened seek ever additional super opportunities. Here's the latest story from one guy, says he. Here's the trick. You go ahead and have a phone, so people won't think you're too weird, and then arrange for it to always give a busy signal whenever anyone calls you. A viewer asked if this has anything at all to do with the question of entertainment and the mind. Religion is to behavior as the secret is to a more conscious man. Being able to recall the obvious before it became obscured is a solid sign of a well-traveled thinker. The king finally told his main messenger, look, if you don't have anything good to report, just shut the fuck up. Increased consciousness and family ties. A mystic ain't kin to nobody. How about another excursion into how you can take something that would apparently be quite reasonable, quite well-founded, almost unopen to normal debate, and see that it can be thought of another way and is never thought of that way, and not thought of simply in the opposite direction, and not thought of in another manner because the original one was incorrect, but because of blank. Tied into how it is that in the intellectual world, the world that's singular to man, that it is singular in itself in a particular way, that is, that it is the only form of life, of existence, that can apparently continue to nourish itself through self-consumption, that is, through cannibalism, that contrary to the subspecies within life, as I assume all of you know, the breeding of, let's say, dogs. Everything that we call dogs now, those that recognize the distinctive breeds, are artificial. They're mortally created. There is no such thing as a German Shepherd. There is no such thing as a Doberman Pinscher, not naturally. And once things are bred, specifically, I assume, or I'll point out to you, they then begin to be extremely prone to an overt display of whatever was inherently a flaw or a potential weakness to start with, such as German Shepherds are known to suffer historically from hip dysplasia. And there's nothing they can do. If you keep breeding to get something that looks like, as the American Kennel Club calls a German Shepherd, they're going to have the propensity for that. And those of you that are interested in such matters, you might also consider beyond what appears to be the social and psychological terms, that is also the basis for the worldwide historical prohibitions against incest, against family. Because when you start having that kind of biological mating between brother and sister, or mother and father, or even first cousins, whatever potential flaw you've got, it is simply a fact. It happens with sweet peas, it happens with dogs, it happens with humans. It is very, very likely to come to the forefront. And if you do it more than once, it's almost a sure thing. But now consider, this is not even we hadn't got to the point yet of tonight, but I want you to see life as a whole. It's another interesting aspect once you see that, but I didn't bring up anything new. All this is just accepted street level knowledge. But inside of life itself, down to humans, down to the animals, down to plant life, you cannot, in a profitable, healthy manner, deal in inbreeding, which is a form of cannibalism. That one particular strain of canines or of humans, you cannot continue to let it breed upon itself, because whatever is its inherent weakness. And you can say that every strain of genetics has got some potential flaw. And you take a brother and sister, two dogs or two lions or two fern plants that are too close to one another, and they both have the potential weakness in some part of the genetic code, then once they mate, it's almost a certainty, or it's extremely dangerous that even the first time the flaw will become overt. So you've got that going on in life, that the subspecies cannot deal in cannibalism, incest, whereas life itself does, from all reasonable views, from every scientific view, from every religious view, which I'm just giving you a wide spectrum at street level, that it does appear to be a closed system. But it does continue to nourish itself with apparently no infusion of outside energy. But be that as it may, or even March. Okay, April. At the street level, at ordinary level, at any ordinary view of intelligence, man himself apparently is contradicting that, on the basis that intelligence, all forms of intellectual activity, apparently are involved in a continuing attempt to reform themselves, to correct themselves, to improve themselves. Science, that is one of the guiding verbal lights of science, as one of their own definitions, is that's what science is, a continual attempt to refine knowledge, to correct laws, to correct theories that in the past were lacking, that are proven to be less than fully sufficient to explain the phenomenon in question. Religion, at a much slower rate, but it's kind of, everything has its own advantage. Religion seems to be like, well, whatever the truth was about the extent of the system, or where the system came from, or what the answer is, we can't improve all that much. The truth was known, perhaps we've gone astray, and we've got to sort of reform ourselves, which is what I point out is, in a sense, how religion, looked at as being an extreme away from, or another aspect of science, continues to reform itself. That religions do not just, the major religions and belief systems in the world do not just suddenly go out of date in the same way that a law of physics can almost overnight be replaced by a new one. That they say, now we just discovered this thing is fatally flawed, but we have now that we see the new one, now we see why it's flawed, but don't worry, we've got a new law to take care of it. Religion seems to be involved, as do almost everything this side of science, all social sciences, all social activities of man, which religion is a part thereof, seem to be in a continual more gradual state of reformation, that they continue to try and correct themselves, to reform themselves. But they are still within a closed system. It is a kind of miraculous spiraling progress. Not just circular, it seems to spiral, which you might think, well, that sounds better than just going in circles, except you can spiral within a closed system, and you can say it's better than going in circles. But if you're in a closed system, you can go up, you can go down, you can go sideways. But the kinds of reformation, I thought it came as such a shock. Some of you are surprised. You may not have understood the word. And one of them, it was C-A-S-T-E, the caste system, which is normally identified with being in the general scope of Brahmanism or Hinduism. And it says when the standard caste, the simple explanation or simple version of the Hindu caste system is, these 5 class. Now there's, I think, 33,000, but there were originally 5 castes in which a man was born. The warriors and the kings and the bankers and the merchants and that whatever caste you were born into, that was it. And there was no interaction. You could not move from one caste to another. So I'm going to get to this in a minute. I hardly ever use Hinduism. So figured, while the standard castes go off each morning to raise the crops, man the markets, open the banks, wage the wars, run the governments, and petition the gods, the more awake and do what they must, which is that same sort of thing, make a living, then move on to affairs of greater personal profit. The caste system, even, I'm sure there would be some descriptions, well, I'll go ahead and do it, but I'm sure even ordinary theologians or historians would go along, that you could look at Jainism, you could look at Buddhism as an attempted reform. It doesn't take any, I'm sure that they probably acceptable by now, as an attempted reform of the general form of what we now call Hinduism at the time. And in fact, one of Buddha's ideas that would seem to have been in conflict with his time and place of him reforming was he denied the caste system after being raised in it, after being tutored, being a prince, and becoming an expert, so to speak, in the same way that Jesus supposedly became an expert to the point that he would go into a temple and confound the rabbis. However, he learned to do it. Ha, ha, ha. The New Testament, that just kind of skips over the Buddhist histories goes into the prince actually going off and all the details and who he studied with and the history of it. And with the Jesus story, he just kind of, they don't know what happened. He just suddenly showed up and blew the rabbis' minds away. The Buddhist approach to this, that you had the caste system, which I assume all of you at least know some kind of movie or TV version, is still widely held, the belief in it. And it would appear to be extremely obnoxious to our modern day of thinking. From any political view, from any economic view, from any religious view, from any decent human view, that this is no longer acceptable. People are not born to be high-class people, to be in charge, and then some other people born to be servants. No, that's not right. That is part of modern-day thinking. But also, 2,500 years ago, you had this prince, Buddha. He's sent off, he becomes an expert, he is tutored in all the Hindu beliefs, the caste system being right at the basis of it. And he undergoes his own form of bar mitzvah that all religions have. He became a twice-born Hindu. That is, he reaches adulthood. He was to the point that he understood the teachings. And one of the first things he said after he reached that age, got back home, left the school and got back home, and after a few other incidents anyway, he decided there is no such thing. The gods did not, or Rao did not make men into all these different classes. There is no caste system. But consider this. All of that was a preface to show that we could easily dismiss the whole idea. And those of you that have any sense whatsoever, you do know that I'm not even talking about the caste system. This is not a defense of Hinduism. It's not an attack of Hinduism. It is just marginally even about the damn thing. It's just either that or I got to talk about Wall Street, which is even more boring. Now, you got nobody on Wall Street in the world of finance that's ever been even as mildly interesting as Moses or Muhammad. At any rate. Something about putting on suits and ties that seems to take out the... At any rate, the caste system, I want you to see, when I was saying that this kind of miraculous spiraling progress, it seems as though people that life itself goes in a direction that expands people, and they become more enlightened. They become more understanding. All right, the caste system would appear to be, even 2,500 years ago, an affront to the idea of men being free, being unique, being fully conscious, that this is just not right. And so, 2,500 years ago, you had a man who is now a revered historical figure who said, this is not right. But now, before I even get into the more potentially explosive parts of it, consider this. From one view, the idea of a caste system was an astounding religious move. And that, on that basis, well, for those of you who don't know, the idea is, even though you were born into one caste system, that if you were born into a warrior class or merchant class, you could not move. It does not matter, no matter how rich you got as a merchant, you would never move up to the priestly class or even the kingly class. Of course, the priests having made it up, you might imagine who constitutes the highest. But anyway, so you had, kings, and you had priests, and you had warriors and merchants. But anyway, no matter what you did, let's say that you were born into the merchant caste. No matter how rich you got, no matter how well respected, that does not matter. You do not move in this lifetime. So, you can imagine, in fact, there's stories told that Buddha, after he heard all this, while he was still, before he became the Buddha, he questioned these teachers of the caste system, the Hindu priests. And he says, well, if this is true, no matter how well a man lives a life, no matter how upright is his demeanor and his honesty in life, then he cannot move. He cannot rise to a higher caste than that into which he was born. And they, well, no. And so then he said, well, what is the motivation? What's the payoff for trying to live a good life? Why should anybody try? But here's where it gets good. They went, because if you live a good Hindu life now, you can be reborn in a higher caste. Now, why I say in a sense it was a real clever, thereafter not even equaled move, I humbly submit to you is, as opposed to like the Christian idea of an afterlife. They just say, well, you might do better, or God will really love you. Or they can dream of all sorts of things and say you'll be beautiful, you'll all be big and strong and healthy, and you'll be real sexy looking if you live a good Christian life, which sounds fine. And it seems to many people, it's like take it or leave it. But how about the caste system in Hinduism? They didn't have to paint imaginary pictures. The priest would look at you if you were in the lower caste, or if you're a merchant. And you say, well, I've lived a good life, and I've now gotten rich, and still the caste above me will not let me attend parties. They won't speak to me. It's still the same old rigid system. What the hell, why am I trying to live a good life? And now I'm older. In fact, I've got some extra money. I was thinking about devoting it here to the temple, to you priests. But I got to thinking, why should I? What's the sense of being a good Hindu? And they go, all right, now look. Now see, this is where it gets good. They don't have to paint an imaginary picture of being an angel in a Christian heaven, or with Allah in a Muslim heaven, that it's all fine-looking women and wine and all that, and that's all imaginary. You can go, I like the idea. The caste system, the priest could turn and point to somebody alive. Whoever it was that you said, that's who I like. I mean, why can't I move up to the level of a warrior or of a priest like you? In other words, he could see what he wanted. He could see the payoff that he wanted in life. And the priest says, well, that's the whole point of being a good Hindu. The idea of, well, of course, I assume you all know, is reincarnation specifically, of being reborn on this planet. Not just go to heaven, that's the end of it. The whole idea is you keep trying to go higher. But rather than rather than just an intellectual, a mental picture of a heaven or a paradise, they say, wouldn't you like to be like that? And the guy says, well, yeah, that's why I'm talking to you. Keep living a good life, and next birth, you can come back in a higher caste. In other words, they had living examples. They could pick someone in a position superior to you. and point to them. Or you could bring it up and say, there's somebody, and I can't move up that high in life. No matter how rich I get, I can't move up there. And they go, you're right. But you live a good Hindu life, and when you come back, you can come back like that. That's the whole point. That, I submit to you, was a minor coup. In fact, that's why I'm about to get to the more explosive part. It was too good. It had to be reformed. And tied into that also, just for a second, it wasn't where I was going, but the idea that even the Hindus had, in a more vague way, and Buddha sort of refined it, was, but anyway, they said that the ultimate idea of nirvana was that you had to keep living through and move up in the caste, to go higher and higher, to live a good life as opposed to a bad one, which rather than just a hell or being tortured forever, as you came back even worse. That you could keep going lower in the caste system. You could even go beyond the lowest human caste system and come back, as a dog or a rat. But if you kept going up, the day would come, because somebody finally, I think it was Buddha again, they say, that asked the priest, when he said, well, why should somebody try to live a good Hindu life? And they said, well, because you can move up in the next life, not now. So he said, okay. Then how about you come back, what if every lifetime, let's say you start off in the third caste, and you live a good life, and you come back the next time in the fourth caste, okay? Or the second caste. And then you live a good lifetime, you die, and you come back in the first caste, right? All right, now you're a priest, which is the highest caste. And the priest says, okay. And Buddha says, well, what's the incentive now of living a good life if you've already reached as high as you can go? Priests are not that easily taken. The priest said, because there is a level higher than we see on this planet amongst humans, which is nirvana. Nirvana. That is the point to where you no longer have to return. There is no longer any effort required. You don't have to struggle to do anything. You are then back with, whatever you want to call it, the Godhead. You're back now to the center of creation. You have passed the point of having to make effort. It's just, then it's no longer, it's sliding time, coasting from then on. You could look at the idea of a caste system, and there were other forms throughout the world, but take that literally, because it appears to be, on its surface, so alien, so offensive, not only to right-thinking Buddhas 2,500 years ago, but especially just an ordinary person nowadays. An ordinary person who is not even religious, an ordinary human on this planet now who may just have, his knowledge of Hinduism is, I've heard the word. And if I explained the caste system what it was, and he was not even particularly religious of any stripe, he would say, oh, no, that day, how old is that belief? And I said, well, they've had it for at least 3,000 years. He'd go, well, yeah, they should have dropped it. Because as you all know, that is offensive just on its surface. That is offensive just from a civil view. Not a secular, not a sacred view, but that nowadays that is offensive. That is contrary to the general increasing view of people on this planet, economically, politically. It's no. We're born free, or we should be. We get rid of some of these penny-ante tyrants that are still left. You're supposed to be free. If you have a free market economy, a man can live by his wits, as smart as you are, as good as you are, as much talent you have. You can rise anywhere in life. I was going to try and get you to consider that the caste system had to be reformed. It was too close, may I suggest to you. Now we'll drag it into some of my more up-to-date and better myths than those. Why be sham humble? That was a little joke. The reality behind the caste system, I was going to suggest to you, was way too close to the initial understanding man had when each person had, when he originally looked life dead in the eye for that split second before almost everybody looked off. That split second when you came down the assembly line and life was checking you out to make sure that you could operate as a reasonably good Ken or Barbie doll, Adam or Eve, or Buddha or Buddhess. And life looked you right in the eye, and you had that split second, and you went. The idea of a caste system was far too close to that split second, that momentary understanding that people had of the situation. It had to be reformed. No, this can't be. No, we can't have this at all. They are still reforming it. They're reforming it now, not in the guise of a Buddha trying to reform the caste system inside the Hindu belief structure. It is now psychological. It is now sociological. It is certainly now religious in the most common sense. That is, one of the items tonight I put to you was that one of religion's purposes has been to assure men that they are free and thus responsible for their actions. Well, and responsible. And by this, they are freed from whatever initial understanding they may have had about the matter, which was in conflict with the later view. I can't resist going back for a second. It seems so foreign to us, as it should be. I don't mean that it had any literal, physical vitality that we should try to revive. But think about the idea, if you were born, and if we called it something besides a caste system, that we were born on let's take the 5 levels again, for no particular reason, other than the caste system that was their original. What if it was now some sort of religion offered down the street or somewhere that said, did you realize that all men are born just out of the core of creation, out of the Big Bang, from God, whatever you want to call the original source, and that we're born immovably into one of 5 conscious classes, or 5 levels of intelligence. Not talking about education, because remember, a merchant, a guy in the 3rd level of the caste system, it doesn't mean that just because you're not as high as a priest, it doesn't mean that you can't do well in your system, at your caste level, or if you were born a farmer. Just because you're down at the 1st level as opposed to the 5th level of a priest, it doesn't mean that you cannot flourish, that you cannot do well as a farmer or as a merchant. But no matter how well you do as a farmer, you're not going to become a merchant. And no matter how well you do as a merchant, you're not going to become a warrior. And no matter how well you do as a warrior, you're not going to become a priest. But you can excel. You can succeed at the level. So, now let's move back to my made-up example. What if there was a religion offered that said we are born, just born into this world at this level, in one of 5 distinct intellectual categories? That you just are. You can get educated, doesn't mean, and you can get rich. You might become well-known in some field at that level, but you are not going to become more intelligent. And by more intelligent is when I start off saying a level of consciousness, and I assume you understand what I mean. You will never understand any more about life. You'll never be able to come any closer to what the secret of being here is about than you were born with. You can come up with more theories, you can become more educated, you can become popular, you can become famous, you can become rich at whatever your intellectual field is. But you're not going to move in that lifetime. That in a sense you understood as much about what life is, what man is, the day you were born, as you might know 50 years later with a PhD and 20 books on the history or on the theories of what life's about. You may be a recognized authority, but according to this little made-up example, in the same way as the caste system originally, you would not understand any more. It is not possible. You would have to in some way come back in another life if there was going to be any sort of individual progress, that you're not going to affect it in this lifetime. May I suggest to you, if you think about it a second, you could almost slip that in on people nowadays. You understand? As opposed to the caste system, to say, well, we're all born into a caste system, whether you know it or not. That we're just born in a certain kind of social position. They're just a place that we all belong in life, and you can't move. You can succeed if you were born a farmer type, you're a farmer. If you were born a banker type, a merchant, that's it. You may make a profit, you may get rich, but that's all you're ever going to be in this lifetime. But work hard, do well, live an upright Hindu life or whatever life, and maybe you'll come back as a higher type person. Nowadays, that was you could not make that fly, as you know, in the Western world. Almost any part of this planet now, except the most backward, people just dismiss it out of hand. But you could almost make them go for, if you'd called it levels of intelligence, some sort of levels. That would probably be too offensive to most non-intelligent people now, because, as I point out to you, people are very touchy, stupid, simple people, about being called stupid and simple. If you don't remember, that's the old joke about a guy who goes into a Western bar and hollers, "I'm going to shoot all you ugly sons of bitches in here." And of course, 90% of the men in there reach for their guns. Like, you can't talk to me that way. You don't have to be specific. You just go into a room, go into a country, go into a planet and say, "All right, all you dumb mothers are going to get it. I'm about, all you dumbos, you're about to get it. I know how to do it." You're going to get 90% of the people go, "Wait a minute." You don't have to go out and specifically step on people's feet. All you got to do is holler, stupid, ignorant, dumb. And suddenly people, it's like they will, you already got it, is people will volunteer. They don't mean to. They think it's something else. They go into a defensive stance like, "Hey, you can't talk to me that way." Which is to say, how'd you know how stupid I was? Which, of course, is giving them too much credit, because that's one of the side benefits, that's one of the saving graces of being simple. If you're simple, you don't ever know how simple you are. You always suspect something's wrong. That's why people get touchy, but you don't really know it. That's why a simple man will fight you, or an ugly man, or, will fight you, almost to death sometimes. Whereas if you had any intelligence, well, never mind. The other way, it gets too high, gets a little higher up the caste system. You got to figure that out for yourself. If you got something to defend, I think I may be quoting myself, if you got something to defend, you ain't got nothing worth defending. Besides life, you understand? But now we're not talking about biological level. Anybody with any intelligence would defend themselves physically. But you understand, being insulted, that's not survival based. That's not a matter of life and death, apparently. Just according to how stupid you are. At any rate, what I started to say, you would not get people to accept it on the basis I was going to change the word if I said that this religion that I was making up was offering a view of life that there was an intellectual caste system, not a social, that you're not born in a locked social position, that you can move up freely, that you can move up from being lower class, like we'll hear in most of the world nowadays, that has any political freedom. You may be born poor. You may be born to an uneducated family, but nowadays you can not only get rich in places with a free market economy and a certain amount of political freedom, but you may get rich enough. You may get so rich that the old line rich, even though you may be no very rich, they will, you get rich enough, they will suddenly kind of swallow their pride and think, well, he is kind of an upstart and sort of crude. But of course, you got that money, you can get uncrude pretty quick. That they will finally accept you. I know it gets into, it's not a class in sociology. I know that they can still maybe snicker at you behind your back, but they make sure you don't hear them, at least you buy at their company and put them out of business. But at any rate, apparently nowadays, socially, the idea of the caste system is not only offensive theoretically, it's a relic of days gone by. Because in any progressive 20th century type government and environment now, there's supposed to be that kind of freedom, that you can go as high as your abilities will take you, socially. But now this religion I made up, they said, no, all that's true, we're not denying that, there's nothing wrong with that. But you people have got to realize, says this new religion, that we are born each time in this lifetime, that the caste system was actually a bad metaphor. But thank God this new religion is here to refine it and explain it to you. That what it actually meant was that we were born into, and I was going to say originally, an intellectual caste system. But nowadays, that would infer that in some way it's tied to your social position or wherever you're born, and people would want to go, no, I don't like that. So what you'd say is probably conscious, that you're born into a conscious level, that there's a caste, that there's a 5-tiered level of consciousness into which everyone is born. That is vague enough to most people. If you talk about consciousness, most people are just minimally conscious enough that they just barely know what the word is. You talk about intelligence and they think, well, you're saying I'm stupid. But if you say consciousness, and then they get touchy again. But if you say, no, it's a level of consciousness. I mean, that kind of sounds like almost a theme from Star Trek or Twilight Zone. They know what consciousness, they think they know what it means. Don't ask them. Because then they'll start saying, wait a minute, you're playing with me trying to make me look stupid again. But consciousness, to the more simple, is sort of vague enough that they might go, well, I can't deny that. Because there does seem to be in life people that just automatically seem to know more, or they seem to be more authoritative in what they seem to know, whether they have a PhD or whatever. There just seems to be people that know what's going on. Or they seem to relatively know more than maybe you do or your brother-in-law. And so you could almost make that fly. To say there are levels of consciousness, and you could even, I wasn't going in much further, but you could even expand the basis of that into explaining historically the mystics of the past, of the Jesus and the Buddhas. The point was they were simply born at a higher level of consciousness. Not necessarily all this stuff about they were sent from the gods, or they were literally, a piece of God fell off and it turned into a Hindu god, or it turned into Buddha or Confucius. No, they were simply born at a higher level, and we're all working our way up. Many people would go, even educated people, I can make that go. And they go, yeah, okay. Now I'm asking you, how much difference is there between that and the 3,000-year-old caste system? And somewhere in the middle, how did it get in there? The Buddhas. Again, all religion, in a sense, can be seen as some sort of attempted reform of a previous religion. You could even look at Judaism as being an attempt to reform pagan religion at that era, of that particular era. And other parts of the world, the same thing. Confucius was going on with the same thing. Then you could look at Buddha's attempt to reform Hinduism. You could look at Christianity's attempt to reform Judaism. You look at Islam's attempt to reform both Christianity and Judaism. And the attempts, all of these, bring into play, the more you go historically, from the Hindus, from the pagan religions, the nature religions, the more you move up this way, apparently to contemporary times, more and more, every time it seems to reform, it seems to be a new emphasis placed upon you are free and responsible. Because the old idea of Hindu gods was, in the caste system, you were born in a certain place and you almost have no choice. Well, at least where you are in this lifetime, you have no choice. Now you have a choice as to whether you try and live by the Hindu laws and you come to the temple and you pay respect to the priest and contribute money and don't act in non-Hindu ways. But insofar as there being a great amount of freedom, marginal. Now, the general view would be not only politically, but psychologically, again, with certain, it can never be 100%, because if you do that, then man can explain their way out of being stupid and not knowing anything. That is, psychologically now you could say, well, men are free. I mean, each person, assuming you don't have any severe physical brain damage when you're born. Everything else being fairly normal, you are relatively free to do what you want to do. To decide to live a happy life, a good life, where you want to be civilized and law-abiding, or be a criminal, whether you want to be decent to your fellow man, honest or dishonest. It's up to you. And if you say, wait a minute, then they always go, well, now, of course, there could be certain subconscious traumas that are affecting you now of which you're unaware. Oh, nothing at all like demons. Oh, no, we're way beyond that. I always like that modern men no longer believe in demons. No, evil spirits don't make people do things. Subconscious traumas do. Oh, sounds better. At the heart of what I was going to say of political and religious and social thought now is that within, I always remember that, they always got that little way out. But within that kind of general area, as they now say, it is common belief. When I say they, your parents, ordinary society accepts it. It's not that they're being misled by they, but it is now believed that we are free. Up here, free. And we're responsible. That if you are a criminal, if you are illiterate, then you almost chose it. You can say, well, I've been poor, I didn't have time to go to school, and they can still go, well, okay. And you can say, I was born, my parents lived in a shack up in the mountains of Kentucky. I had to work since I was a kid. I can't even read and write. I feel at a great disadvantage. I can't read philosophy. I can't even read the newspaper, and it's not my fault. I wasn't free. And you can say, well, how old are you? And you can say, well, 35. And you can say, well, now, They've got classes at the local college at night, and they're free to the indigent. In other words, you can always say, you could have done better. You could have done something. But it seems as though that the general feel now is, and very specifically in the religious area, even though if you might not be religious, any specific person, you are still affected by it as it being the kind of general aroma permeating the city, street level consciousness, is that spiritually, psychologically, but spiritually, that we are free. And if you're free, you're responsible. Now that's where all religions have to finally put down their foot, unless you, well, they have to put down their foot collectively. The religion has to go, no, I know that your family may have beat you or that you were poor, but there's no excuse. A Catholic does not do so-and-so. Now you were born a Catholic or you confirmed yourself as a Catholic. Now I don't care how poor you are, I don't care that you didn't have any advantage in life. A Catholic does not, whatever it is, drink, or a Catholic does not practice birth control. There's no excuse for it. And you have to go, well, yeah, I might not like it, but you got me there. That is why the caste system had to be reformed. That's why the idea that life looks you, or my idea, my myth that life looks you dead in the eye, and at one time I suggested to you this idea of secret knowledge, of being more consciously awake, it is not a regressive, is not a retroactive attempt, but in one sense, at one time everybody knew the secret. You had a split second. I mean, life's got to look everybody. We're talking about an assembly line going by faster than a Yugo with a bunch of drunken Russians or whoever made it. We're talking about things flying by. You only got a second. Or beers, some of them get by with a little dead mice in them. Of course, I never could understand. I can understand somebody maybe with a glass, one of these jars of lemonade, find a dead rat and complain. But a beer drinker to complain about just because he found a mouse in his beer, that's pushing consumerism a bit far, if you ask me. But be that as it March. I guess we're up to July. Imagine life and every person on this planet, pushing 10 billion, they say now, flying by, constantly going on. You got 1 second. That 1 second, in a sense, everyone knew exactly what this was about. I mean, life, this. What are you going to do? I mean, there you are. You just came from being one little spermosa, one little egg, and suddenly you bloomed out as a person. And I'm trying to take the best possible view to humans. And there you stand, your naked little self, and life itself. All of reality is staring you dead in the eye for a second, like, well, what do you think? And you don't know what to think. You have to look away. You could then, back to the spiraling, by the way, you could then, as many religions, especially the aspect of religion normally referred to as the mystical attempt, or the mystical side of every religion on this planet, in their various ways, from the Zens to the Reformed Hindus to the mystical Christians to the Kabbalists within Judaism, they will all, without hardly exception, notice I gave my stuff hardly, they look at the attempt to become more conscious, more enlightened, more spiritual. They look at it in some way as a return to something. It is often referred to as a return to the previous unadulterated relationship with God, an attempt to return to the unsevered union with creation, or an attempt to return, as the Hindus and Buddhas still more or less refer to it, as an attempt to return to a state in which you and the world soul are one. And none of that is open to any great useful form of criticism or say that's silly, but it is ill-placed in this sense that if you know what you're doing, it is not simply a matter of, all right, I'm going to stop where I am and I'm going back. Because to do that infers, you cannot escape it, it infers that you are critical of the current position. You think, yes, we have gone astray, and that we have to straighten ourselves out. I have to reform myself. I have to become a good Christian. I have to start practicing Catholicism or Judaism again, or I'll never get back. That we are all just off on a stray path. We'll never make it. We're just lost in the wilderness. That is inherent. It is inescapable intellectually. It is inescapable based upon the electrochemical dynamics of the physics driving the human brain, for those of you who are not religious any longer, or those of you who can think straight after that statement. But the idea that we've got to return, because an ordinary religious person or ordinary would-be mystic could even take what I just said and try to tie it to what I've been talking about before and even tonight and say, well, wait a minute. That goes right in line with what you said. You're talking about that one time. Your little myth, your little allegory is that life stares everyone dead in the eye at one time, like the world soul, creation itself, that everybody at one time was right there, dead on, with God. And you had a split second like to decide, do I want to stay here? Do I want to know more? Or will I look away? And you're saying that we all looked away. And so what you're saying is the whole idea of trying to become more conscious or to awaken oneself or to become a mystic is to get back there where we went astray when we should have stayed right there and go, wow, or tell me more, or look at me closer, or whatever it takes to get up the strength, to get up the spiritual wherewithal to be able to go back and to come back into union with God or the center of the universe or the life force and now be able to have a direct relationship. They could say, well, that's all you're talking about. Tut, tut. Well, that's extremely mystical talk, but it's in my mystical dictionary that'll be on sale later. It's under T's, by the way, if you'd like to purchase a dictionary. It is not simply a return, because if you could indeed return, you would have regressed. Consider the caste system again, socially and then consciously. And consider what I was bringing out last time, that even though I have made up news items and stories, or even one time said in one little news item, that those who think the mystical is mystical have no idea what the mystical is. Or that if you want any proof that someone does not understand what the mystical is ask them or to find out, do they think it's weird and strange? And they go, oh, sure. Now, if it's not, why would most weekend, ordinary drugstore mystics want to be mystics? Well, they don't. Not if you say, well, no, there's nothing weird about it. They go, get out of here. You know? They got no interest in it. But, in a sense, it is weird. In a sense, it is strange. In a sense, it is super strange. In a sense, it is supremely strange. It is the epitome, the zenith, the apex of strangeness, except not in a way it can be seen. It's in a way that can be said, but as soon as it's said, people go, get out of here. That is, it's strange on this basis, that it is not just simply a return to the past, but it is a knowing something that you do not now know, which the idea of it being a secret is well put. But as far as it's like a secret that's been hidden back there, or hidden over there, or hidden up there. Ordinary people, or ordinary would-be mystics, would believe that whatever the secret is to correct our present failure to understand, or our present stupidity. And tut-tut too. It's not. And the strangeness is, the supreme strangeness is, that the secret, or transcendental knowledge, mystical knowledge, let's just call it that right quick, it does not correct anybody else's knowledge. It doesn't correct your knowledge now. It is not in contradiction to your knowledge. Now, if you're an ordinary person and good and intelligent and rational, you go, well, there's nothing left. That if there is such a thing as secret knowledge or mystical knowledge, and I say, okay, there is. And they go, and you're saying it doesn't correct what I now know. No. And it's not the opposite from what I now know. No. Well, of course, you could start trying to get in between, but that about covers it. Anything else, you're just playing around with the odds. You're playing around with fractions. It doesn't correct what I now know. Because what that would tell them is, they're saying, well, what you're saying is, what I now know is all right. Then by then, they're really seriously down to the level of, get out of here. But what makes it super strange is simply the good old one that you can dismiss as a non sequitur, which I said I can put in words, but it makes you just go, "Ah, come on." It's what makes it supremely strange, is that no matter what you know, no matter what you think, it's something else. Which has kept, that one idea has kept many, many a Zen monk in school and business long after they should have closed up shop. Because people have been hearing that put in various ways for a goodly number of years. And many people get fascinated and it strikes them somewhere. I don't mean that that one idea is going to put you in a new level of consciousness, but it strikes many people, as silly as it sounds or as ridiculous, as non-informative, to say, all right, anything you think, what mystical knowledge is, or what the awakening is, what the enlightenment. And they go, yeah, all right, I've read all about it. Let's say I was talking to somebody that was attempting to pursue a Buddhist kind of ritual, the mystical, the Zen side. And I said, well, the idea of enlightenment, that's what you're after. That's why you've gone through all this practice. Is that it's going to happen. And the way that Buddha and the whole literature, the Buddhist scriptures and fables and myths describe it, that suddenly there he sat, after all this work, and he went, and it happened. Just according to his own story, that's what you're after. And they go, well, yeah. So he understood something, because he said, now I am no longer blind. I am no longer ignorant. Now remember, he was educated. He was an expert. He was a prince, and he had spent much of his childhood being versed specifically by the priesthood. He would have been an expert in the Hindu beliefs. So he was not an ill-educated person, even in the religious matters. And he went, now I see. And if I ask the person, that's what you're after, and they go, yeah, sure it is. And if they said, do you know what it is? And what if I, kind of inferred, well, yeah, I do. And they said, well, what is it? And I said, well, what do you think it is? I mean, what would you just imagine? Well, let's say that they were even up to the point of being able to refrain from answering that they'd go, I don't know. Which would take an exceptional person. That would prove that at least they hadn't wasted all their time up until the end, even if they could do that. Because most of them, if you don't know, most people, when left alone just for a second, hawks will go back to hawking and cuckoos to cuckooing, remember. That they'll revert back after spending 30 or 40 years of a man sitting there meditating, listening to the discourses of some Zen monk, some strange bird, showing them that there is a mother of all bird songs, that there is a reality behind all of these diverse songs all of you different birds have, and they all go, and they sit and they meditate. They cross their little bird legs and they sit in a position. And they try to calm their little bird minds, and you leave them alone just for a second, and they all revert back to chickens clucking and ducks quacking. It's all back like it started. But if I had this Zen person, and I said, well, what do you think it is? What do you think the enlightenment? What is it you think that Buddhahood, or being enlightened, what is it that he saw? What do you think it's going to bring on? If they were real good, they would say, I don't know. Most of them would fall back into cuckoo talk. That is, they would go, oh, I'm pretty sure I know what it is. Which, of course, assures them of a continuing hobby until the day they die, which is trying to get out of it. But even if they were sharp enough, even if they understood or suspected enough not to answer, and they said, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. I feel like you know. I don't know. I really don't. And I said, okay. Whatever it is you think at any time, the enlightenment is not that. No matter what it is. Just that idea verbally, as I said, has been captious to many people. Those who are captured by it do not benefit ultimately from it, because it becomes almost a little impressive sounding non sequitur that they want to hang on a keychain and maybe flash around among their friends or to themselves, and things are sort of dull. But it is a fact. That is the super strangeness of it. Do you understand then, or do you get another idea of why, in a sense, the caste system had quite valid electrochemical basis to begin with, and was, or could have been conducive, if you knew how to handle it, to focusing one's attention. Because to focus one's attention, even at the ordinary level, is to set up a more conducive atmosphere to becoming a priest, or if you're a farmer, to becoming a merchant. then becoming a warrior, then becoming a priest, and then getting the hell out of here. Going to nirvana, as they said, getting beyond it all. But to get beyond it all means to get beyond it all. Well, you mean maybe just straighten out certain aspects. That sounds suspiciously to me, sir, like Reformation. That sounds like you're trying to straighten out your errors in present thinking. Well, certainly I am. Well, good luck. Have a nice life. Have a nice hobby. That is not enlightenment. But notice, it will also keep you from worrying about it, even if you are not a specific would-be mystic in life. If you were just the sort trying to live a good, civilized, decent life, as long as you think, well, we're free, not just politically, but internally, our souls, our spirits are free. We can be good people, bad people. We can be people of opinionated hatreds and prejudices, or we can be more enlightened, civilized, caring, charitable people. You go, well, are you that way? Well, no, not all the time. I mean, sometimes I get real mad and I hate people and I'm not charitable. And of course, as they're supposed to, they say, well, and I don't feel good about it. And I'm trying to work it out. Well, good. And as you know by now, you should be in favor of everybody trying to do better in life. But as far as everybody, the ordinary people, that doing better, that which is a form of reformation, I'm going to do better. I'm going to straighten myself out. That is not awakening. But see, that is part of life. If you want to look at it this way one more time, I keep bringing this up for a reason. It's not that life has it in for people, but life is going to keep its balance. I don't care whose expense, at whose expense. I mean, it's going to keep its balance. It's not even in question. But part of the balance is, as long as you believe you're free, life doesn't have to put up bars. As long as you think, well, I'm free. I can think more enlightened thoughts. I could expand my conscious horizons. Well, have you? Well, no. But I could. Not only do you say, well, yeah, I could, plus if you're ordinary, you can also feel bad about not doing it, at least for that split second. You go, well, do you try to be more open-minded to other people's culture and religions and political views, just your fellow man? And they go, well, no, but, gee, I'm real busy. And at least for a split second, it's like the bars are back. Like, well, I'm a farmer. I'm in the second caste. Well, I don't know. I'm real busy. I got to look after my family. It doesn't last a long time, but it is a part of the general level of consciousness wherein you feel as though life makes everyone think, well, with that little, I'm free and responsible. Well, do you do like you should? Well, no, not all the time. And it's like life, or somebody, like a shill for life, or one of his underlings, instead of life itself, like looking at it, it's just a general thing that life somewhere behind a closed door, behind a dark cloud is going, well, when it says, you're free, you could be more conscious, you could be more understanding, you could be more charitable, you could be more tolerant of other people. You go, yeah, sure. You go, well, why aren't you? You go, well, it's like this feeling. That's what normally passes for guilt with ordinary people, which is sort of a safety valve, because as long as you feel guilty, you won't do anything. It's like, that's part of the philosophy of being a man. As long as you can feel guilty, you're civilized. And as long as you can feel guilty and you're civilized, you don't really have to make any effort. Because then it's as though life or somebody can turn to you and say, well, why don't you do better? You go, well, damn it, I feel guilty. What do you want? Now, see, I could get ordinary people to kind of laugh along with that. How about this? Let's move it back to my made-up religion and see how fun it is. You say, do you realize you could be more conscious, you could be more intelligent? And people go, well, yeah. And you go, why don't you? And they don't feel guilty then. They're ready to fight. Think about that. Nobody feels guilty about being less conscious than they could be. It might take you a minute or two to get them to agree to what you're saying, the words, and you say, not more educated, but more intelligent, just more conscious about what's going on in life. Don't you think you could be? And let's say that you could get educated, or reasonable people go, well, yeah, and then you say, well, why don't you? It's not the same as why aren't you a better person, because they'll feel guilty about that, and then go on with their life. But if you do it this way, they won't feel guilty. They will, in fact, get to be defensive, and they give you a knuckle sandwich. Why is that? Why will people accept a body blow to their morality? To say, well, you're an opinionated bastard. You go around, you're always bad-mouthing other people. You got no charity. You're just an intolerant. You're just a prick. And they'll go, yeah, you're right. I know I overdid it, but I mean, you can tell somebody. You can say, you don't live a right life. You could live a life. You call yourself a Jew. You call yourself a Muslim. Well, yeah, you're not. Look at the way you talk about people. Look at the kind of jokes you make and the comments you make about people. You don't help people. You go, yeah, you're right. People will do that, and they will take it and feel guilty. But you get anything that starts getting closer to their consciousness, not their behavior, not their morality, and they won't feel guilty. Not education, because they'll explain that away. We're talking about consciousness. If you just got them to react to it, to the word, they get touchy. Think about that. Well, in your spare time, I know you're busy working in the coal mines and having to keep up 4 wives and 27 children and work 3 jobs, but in your spare time,